The important and irreplaceable role all females are called to is spiritual motherhood. So for the rest of the talk here, I'll be referencing this document. It's called Eucharistic Adoration for the Sanctification of Priests and Spiritual Maternity. I actually found it, I downloaded it from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops website. It's free. And it's a great read, and I recommend all of you take a look at it and download it. Now, while all men are in need of spiritual motherhood, I'm going to focus now on spiritual motherhood for priests. That's the focus of the document. But in reality, the themes are overarching regardless of the vocation of the man. So when we think about the spiritual war, we should ask ourselves who's leading the charge. The priest, obviously. From this document, quote, "The vocation to be a spiritual mother for priests is largely unknown, scarcely understood, and consequently rarely lived, notwithstanding its fundamental importance. It is a vocation that is frequently hidden, invisible to the naked eye, but meant to transmit spiritual life. Pope Pius X once stated, 'Every vocation to the priesthood comes from the heart of God, but it goes through the heart of a mother.'" But you don't have to be a physical mother to be a spiritual mother. All of you ladies are called to be spiritual mothers right now. Independent of age or social status, any woman can become a mother for priests. This type of motherhood is not only for mothers of families, but just as possible for an unmarried girl, a widow, or some woman who might be ill, willing to offer her suffering. Pope St. John Paul II even thanked the child for her motherly help. He said, "I also express my gratitude to Blessed Jacinta for the sacrifices and prayers offered for the Holy Father, whom she saw suffering greatly." And Blessed Jacinta at the time, when she offered this, was only 7 years old when she prayed for the Holy Father. And if you're not familiar with Blessed Jacinta, she was one of the seers of Fatima. So I'll share a couple stories from this document that are great examples. First, I'm going to read a story about Bishop William Emanuel Ketteler. He was a German bishop. In 1869, a German diocesan bishop was sitting together with his guest, Bishop Ketteler from Mainz. During the course of their conversation, the diocesan bishop brought up his guest's extremely blessed apostolate. Bishop Ketteler explained to his host, "I owe thanks in everything that I have accomplished with God's help to the prayer and sacrifice of someone I do not even know. I can only say that I know somebody has offered his or her whole life to our loving God for me, and I have this sacrifice to thank that I even became a priest." He continued, "Originally, I wasn't planning on becoming a priest. I had already finished my law degree and thought only about finding an important place in the world to begin acquiring honor, prestige, and wealth. An extraordinary experience held me back and directed my life down a different path. One evening, I was alone in my room, considering my future plans of fame and fortune, when something happened which I cannot explain. Was I awake or asleep? Did I really see or was it just a dream? One thing I do know, it brought about a change in my life. I saw Jesus very clearly and distinctly standing over me in a radiant cloud showing me his sacred heart. A nun was kneeling before him, her hands raised up in the air. From his mouth I heard the words, 'She prays unremittingly for you.' I distinctly saw the appearance of a sister, and her traits made such an impression on me that she has remained in my memory to this day. She seems to be quite an ordinary lay sister. Her clothing was very poor and rough. Her hands were red and calloused from hard work. Whatever it was, a dream or not, it was extraordinary. It shook me to the depths of my being, so that from that moment on I decided to consecrate myself to God in the service of the priesthood. So if you think that I have done something admirable, now you know who really deserves the credit. A religious sister who prayed for me, maybe without even knowing who I was. I'm convinced I was prayed for, and I will continue to be prayed for in secret and that without these prayers, I could never have reached the goal that God has destined for me. The diocesan bishop asked him, do you have any idea the whereabouts or identity of the one who has prayed for you? Bishop Ketteler said, no, I can only ask God that each day, whilst she is still on earth, he bless and repay her 1,000-fold for what she has done for me. The next day, the bishop was visiting a convent and celebrating Mass and handing out Holy Communion to the last row of sisters when one of them suddenly caught his eye. His face grew pale and he stood there motionless. Finally, regaining his composure, he gave Holy Communion to the sister, who was kneeling in recollection, unaware of his hesitation, and then he concluded the liturgy. So after the Mass, he had lunch with the sisters, and then he began to visit with the Mother Superior when he was visiting all the sisters. And he asked the Mother Superior to gather all the sisters so that he could see them all. And she gathered them all, and he quietly asked the Mother Superior afterwards, are these all the sisters? She looked over to the group of sisters and then said, Your Excellency, I called all of them, but in fact, one of them is not here. She works in the barn, and in such a commendable way that in her enthusiasm, she sometimes forgets other things. I would like to see that sister, the bishop said. A little while later, the sister who had been summoned stepped into the room. Again, Bishop Ketteler turned pale, and after a few words with all the sisters, he said he would like to be alone with just this sister. He began to ask her, Do you know me? I have never seen Your Excellency before. He asked her again, Have you ever prayed for me, or offered up a good deed for me? She replied, I do not recall that I have ever heard of Your Excellency. He was silent for a few minutes, and then he asked her, Do you have a particular devotion that you like? Her response was the devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. You have, it seems, the most difficult task in the convent, he continued. Oh, no, Your Excellency, but I cannot lie. It is unpleasant for me. And what do you do when you have such temptations against your work? The sister said, For things that cost me greatly, I grew accustomed to facing them with joy and enthusiasm out of love for God. And then I offer them up for one soul on earth. To whom God chooses to be gracious as a result, I have left completely up to him, and I do not want to know. I also offer up my time in Eucharistic adoration every evening from 8 to 9 for this intention. The bishop asked her, Where do you get the idea to offer up all your merits for someone totally unknown to you? She said, I learned it while I was still out in the world. At school, our teacher, the parish priest, taught us how we can pray and offer our merits for our relatives. Besides that, he said that we should pray much for those who are in danger of losing their souls. Since only God knows who really needs prayer, it is best to put your merits at the disposition of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, trusting in his wisdom and omnipotence. That is what I've done, she concluded, and I always believed that God would find the right soul. So then the bishop asked the sister, How old are you? 33, Your Excellency. The bishop paused a moment, and then he asked her, When were you born? The sister stated the day of her birth, and her birthday was the day of his conversion. Back then, he had seen her exactly as she was before him now. And have you any idea whether your prayers and sacrifices have been successful? No, Your Excellency. The bishop asked her, Do you want to know? And she said, Our dear God knows when something good happens, and that is enough. The bishop was shaken. So continue this work in the name of the Lord, he said. She knelt down immediately at his feet and asked for a blessing. So profoundly moved, the bishop stepped over to compose himself, and then sometime later, as he said goodbye to the Mother Superior, he returned to the apartment of the bishop who was hosting him. And he told him, Now I have found the one I have to thank for my vocation. It is the lowest and poorest lay sister of that convent. I cannot thank God enough for his mercy because this sister has prayed for me for almost 20 years. On the day she first saw the light of the world, God worked my conversion, accepting in advance her future prayers and works. What a lesson and reminder for me. Should I become tempted to vanity by a certain amount of success or by my good works, then I can affirm in truth, you have the prayer and sacrifice of a poor maid in a convent stall to thank. And when a small and lowly task appears of little value to me, then I will also remember the fact what this maid does in humble obedience to God, making a sacrifice by overcoming herself, is so valuable before the Lord our God that her merits have given rise to a bishop of the church.